Hi everyone, it's John. Welcome back to my channel. It is April 1st, 2023. I can't believe it's already time to pull out the whoopee cushions. But April 1st, of course, and unless you've been living under a rock or something, you know it is the first day of the second quarter of Historathon 2023, which I hope will be an ongoing event long into the future. And during quarter number 2, we are going to read books from the year 500 AD to 1500 AD. I tried to pull a few representative books from my library that people might be interested in. This is not a list of books that I plan to read. Obviously, if you know I'm a slow reader, I guess most people do by now, this would just be not exactly tenable for me for a 3-month period, but I want to do more than just list some books that I want to read. I want to give suggestions to other people who might be lacking in ideas. So if you need something to think about, here are a few kinds of history that you might like. I also tried to be a little bit diverse as far as the kinds of history. There's traditional narrative history, there are a couple of biographies, there's some intellectual history, there's even some legal history in here, and a touch or two of philosophy. I tried to not keep it super technical because that's sort of getting into other things that aren't just history related. Excuse me, history related. But let me jump in and tell you the first thing I've decided to read seems to be a go-to author for the second quarter, and this is Dan Jones's The Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England. I am 60 pages in, and right now we are at Henry II sort of building up what his predecessors had lost. So I think we're still in the 1150s/1160s. He's trying to reassemble his lost empire. But as always, I'll report back on that once I finish. And I have about 20 or 22 other books you might like, including another one by Dan Jones too. But here's a biography I found a while back. This is, goodness, what series is this? It's called the English Monarchs series that comes out of the University of California, and it is maybe one of the more controversial monarchs of the period, despite it being 1,000 years long, Richard III, who dies just in the nick of time to be included in quarter 2. This is by Charles Ross. Of course, always gets blamed for The Princes of the Tower, Princes in the Tower, and we'll see another book on that in a second as well. Here is The Formation of Christendom by Judith Herron, and this looks back, I think, mostly, well, of the early days of Christianity, but Judith Herron is also a scholar of Byzantium. So, and of course there's a sort of a Byzantine icon there on the cover. It's been, I have dipped into this and out of this, but it's been a long time, like 15 or so years. So what I would love to do if I pick this up is just read it systematically, cover to cover. Here is a book on the Vikings. We have to keep Vin interested, right? By Robert Ferguson. This is from Penguin. I have never dipped into this. I've read a few reviews. They seem to think, some people think it's a bit dry, but I'm hard to bore. So here's another interesting French historian who you see quite a few books by. His name is Georges Duby, or Duby. This is the Age of the Cathedrals, Art and Society. from 980 to 1420. Kind of an emphasis, as you would think from the title there, on architectural history, but mixes in a little bit of cultural, social history as well. All right, so some law. Don't think I've shown any history of law books because I didn't know anything that I could really fit in before the year 500. But now that we're at that point, I can include a couple of things, including a book that actually does go well before 500 now that I think about it. This is The History of Law by John Maxey Zane. And this is a Liberty Fund book. Liberty Fund is an organization I've mentioned dozens of times on this channel. They put out great stuff. History, law. Their emphasis is economics, but this goes all the way back through. Well, the first chapter is called one of the first chapters. Laws among primordial men, and then it covers Greek philosophy of law, Jewish law, Babylonian law, Aryan law, the building of English common law, and it's on the chunky side. It's about 600 pages, but it looks to be a nice summary, and of course only a part of it will be from 500 to 1500, but it looks to be a pretty substantial part. And to maybe supplement the Dan Jones book, and to get maybe a little more, not just a monarchical history, but sort of a broader view, maybe. This is the New Oxford History of England's volume on Plantagenet in England from 1225 to 1360, which of course is not all of Plantagenet history. It starts with Henry II, who became king in the 1150s, and then goes all the way. Goes much past 1360 as well. But this is by Michael Prestwich, and it's not a history of English monarchs. Like I said, it's kind of a topical history. Like chapter 1 is on sort of the environment. Chapter 2, the king and crownship, then government, politics under Henry III, Reconstruction and reform movements, what was going on in Wales, etc. What was going on in Scotland. So it's more topical and quite a bit more scholarly, as you would expect from something put out by Oxford. This is also Plantagenet, England related, but I forgot what the approach of this book is all about. Also kind of topical. A big, long introductory essay there on sources and interpretations, followed by peasants, traders and townsmen, professionals, knights, magnates, and then a concluding section on 13th century politics. But of course, the 13th century is completely consumed by Plantagenet kings. So this is one of the Cambridge medieval textbooks, and this is by Alan Harding. Another book by Judith Herron I really loved when I dug into the formation of Christendom several years ago. But this is by Princeton, the wonderful people over at Princeton. And this is her book that she came out with a year or two ago called Ravenna. And it is Capital of Empire, Crucible of Europe. And we're talking here about maybe I think we go maybe a little bit before 500, 500, 600, 700, 800. But it's right after the fall of the Roman Empire, and has just a lot of really beautiful color plates as well. Just sort of stunning stuff. But sort of placed on the edge of the Western and Eastern empires as they split. Here is another book by Liberty Fund, another book of legal history too. This is The Origins of the Common Law, and this is by Arthur R. Hogue. And it is basically just a discussion, an extended discussion of how the common law, English common law specifically, but how it spread, and how it has its roots in medieval juridical order broadly. And this is one of the Liberty Fund books I've never really gotten around to, but I might use Historathon as an excuse to finally read this. And this is, I guess, on the order of a treatise from the Middle Ages, very, very late Middle Ages. This is Christine de Pizan's The Book of the City of Ladies. Excuse the price tag. Need to remove that. But this is basically sort of a proto-feminist text arguing for the equality of women, for why women should be educated to the same extent as men. And it presents some pretty interesting arguments. And feminism is a lot older than Mary Wollstonecraft. In fact, it's a lot older than Christian de Pizan too, but this is a really important primary text from the period. So we're about halfway done. Alison Weir, another popular historian, she wrote a book on the Prince of the Tower. I think one of the first books that she wrote, and this is of course about Edward III and his brother, who were putatively murdered by Richard III in his power grab for the throne. Pretty short book. Might read that. And here is, and I should say, a nice book I found at a library sale a couple of years ago. This is Thomas Asperger's The First Crusade, A New History, The Roots of Conflict Between Christianity and Islam. I don't really know how deep he's going to cover the historical conflict between Christianity and Islam. I really want it to just be a history of the First Crusade. That would be ideal. But we'll see. This falls, of course, around the middle of our time period. Another Dan Jones book. This is, I guess, the last of the Plantagenets and the first of the Tudors, so the War of the Roses, of course. This takes us, from 1450s to 1480s or so, when, of course, Richard III dies at the Battle of Bosworth Field, and Henry VII takes the throne as the first Tudor king in 1485. And this tells the story of basically the long dynastic battle between the Lancastrians and the Yorks. Here's a two-part book. I picked both, just in case anyone's interested. Geeky stuff like this. This is Marc Bloch. He was a French, I believe, writer during the early part of the 20th century, and he wrote a book called Feudal Society. Bloch was a an interesting historian. He was a member of the Annales School, Annales School of French Historiography. And this is Feudal Society Volume 1, The Growth of Ties of Dependence, and basically just describes the rise out of late Roman Empire, early / what we would call Dark Ages of the economic system that we know as feudalism. And then Volume 2 is here, and it is Social Classes and Political Organization. So Volume 1 sort of builds a substructure, an economic substructure, and then Volume 2 builds on the classes, the hierarchies, the political organizations, like you can tell from the title, that are built on top of that substructure. So, a classic, really, of 20th century writing about the Middle Ages. And in that vein, here's another one. Also, another Princeton book. I promise this wasn't planned. They don't pay me. They should, but they don't. This is The King's Two Bodies, a study in medieval political theology. Everyone's three favorite words right there in a row: medieval, political, and theology. I'm sure that made some eyes glaze over. But this is by Ernst Kantorowicz, who was writing in, I guess, the 20s, 30s, 40s. And this is a book about how the king was perceived not only as a governmental figure, but also as sort of a site of worship or reverence. And it explores that sort of duality, political theology, as the title has it. I've dipped into and out of it before, but I've never sat down and read it systematically, and would love to do so. Okay. Another classic 20th century, a little bit later, and I think we might run over our time period just a little bit here, but mostly not. Renaissance Thought and Its Sources by Paul Oscar Christeller. Classic book in its field. Basically traces the arc all the way back from the Renaissance to Greco-Roman sources through the Middle Ages to where Renaissance writers and intellectuals got their ideas from, and why those driving concerns really preoccupied them so much. So sort of an archaeology of what drove the Renaissance mind, I guess. Didn't realize I had picked so many classic books from the 20th century, but here's another one. This is the classic, really dense, really tough reading, but really rewarding too if you're interested in the literary history of the Middle Ages. This is Ernst Robert Curtius's European Literature in the Latin Middle Ages, which is basically just a philological history, a lot of philology, a lot of careful literary research, stuff on grammar, stuff on different literary forms, just kind of overwhelming in scholarship, to be quite honest. And also look at the footnote to text ratio there. Love it. 2/3 footnote to 1 page of text. But the print is also a bit small. But if you're up for a challenge, there you go. And I made a video. I don't know when I'm going to choose to release it, but in the video I showed 4 books that Princeton wanted to send me, one for each quarter of Historathon. And I said that, well, I got it after March 15th, so I wasn't going to be able to read the book for quarter 1, but the 3 books for the other quarters I was going to read as they came up. And this is the book that I requested for quarter 2. And it is The Crisis of the Early Italian Renaissance by Hans Baron, by Princeton there. And this is a book that he wrote in the 50s. So it is older, but really, from what I understand, was really influential in the history of shaping, especially in Europe and the United States, how Renaissance studies, the trajectory of Renaissance studies over the last 70 or so years. So there's that to think about. And only 3 more books. 2 of which are from Princeton. But this is on the medieval origins of the modern state by Joseph Strayer. Very short book, and one I absolutely know nothing about, other than the fact that, well, the title there kind of says it all. But if you're interested in some political history, the growth of bureaucracy, things like that, in medieval Europe, this might be something to go to. It is all of 110 pages. So it would be a nice, quick read. All right, another biography and another challenging book. This is not a biography for the faint of heart, and it's not for someone who's just casually interested in the figure either. But we'll see if anyone's interested in it. This is from Oxford. It is their series on the English monarchs, and it's their book about King Alfred the Great. And it's by Alfred P. Smith. It is big. We're talking, with notes and everything, 750 pages. The writing is small, and it's a read. It would be a task, but other than sort of the very, very basic stuff about fighting off the Vikings, I could fit what I know about Alfred the Great into a thimble. So maybe something like this is calling your name too. And last but not least, something I don't think I mentioned at the top of the video, one of my long-standing interests is the history of science and the philosophy of science. And this is, if that is your thing, this is for you. Another Princeton book. Let's see where. Okay, well, it's hard to see there, but it's a zone book, which is sort of like an imprint of the books Princeton puts out. This is Wonders and the Order of Nature, 1150 to 1750, by Lorraine Daston and Catherine Park. And this just looks at how changing conceptions in science and the study of science, thought about order, hierarchies, classification, things like that. Don't know too much about it, but it is another sort of classic book about the emergence of early, what we would call modern science. But that is the end of my list of possibilities. I'm looking forward to seeing the lists of everyone else as Q1 ramps up, and I think I will call it a video for now, and I will see everyone later with maybe some more book reviews. Until next time.